Last week, Disney did something that put the entire metaverse on notice. They brought back Bob Iger as CEO, a man who led Disney through several major content acquisitions, including Marvel, LucasFilm, Pixar, and just recently, 21st Century Fox. Now, Bob retired in 2021, but was recently asked to unretire after Disney's board of directors grew unhappy with his successor, Bob Chapek. I actually read Bob Iger's book during the pandemic. It's titled Ride of a Lifetime. And in it, he details what those first three acquisitions of Marvel, Pixar, and Lucasfilm were actually like. He gives the insider stories, such as having to smooth over relations with Steve Jobs and having to reject George Lucas's scripts for episodes 7 to 9 of Star Wars. Yes, George Lucas did write some scripts, and the studio said no. Now, why does this move put all of crypto and notably the NFT side on notice? Well, the only thing Iger actually did while he was retired was invest in and join the advisory board for GENIES, a metaverse avatar company based out of California that runs on the Flow blockchain and sells digital clothes, and where the avatars kind of look a lot like Pixar characters. So Iger knows what's going on in crypto. He's gotten a taste for the metaverse, and he's being brought back into Disney to fix the streaming service that he helped create. It's losing a lot of money despite its outstanding market share, and likely create new revenue streams, many of which may take place right here in Web3. So on today's show, we'll look at different companies in sports and Web3 and evaluate whether they are buyers, sellers, or if they're just holding steady. We'll also look at how and why these big tech acquisitions actually happen and speculate on whether this is the right time in the cycle, the bottom, for them to take place. What's up, everyone? It's LG Doucette, and you're listening to The First Mint, a podcast about Web3, business, and sports. Before we get to the show, a word from our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by Evaluate.xyz, a safe and easy way to meet other NFT collectors, negotiate deals, and swap your moments live. Looking to expand your Top Shot, All Day, and Strike collection without spending your Dapper balance? With Evaluate, you can pair up with trading partners in seconds and swap your existing moments for new ones in secure trading lobbies. The fastest and easiest way to trade NFTs. Visit Evaluate.xyz today to start swapping moments with other collectors. Nothing on today's show should be considered financial or trading advice of any kind. Please do your own thorough research and make your own trading decisions. This is not advice. In today's world, there are actually many reasons for corporate mergers and acquisitions to take place. And naturally, of course, they all revolve around money. We'll count them down as I've got the 6 biggest reasons here why these things happen. The first one is market share. It's likely the most popular reason for mergers and acquisitions. You have various competitors. They're all vying for the same segment of consumers, and one will buy the other to basically capture their percentage of the market. Often, it's obviously a bigger one buying an up-and-comer. The second is to scale the economy. This is where two companies will combine to find efficiencies in their supply chain and eliminate tons of the cost there. It's very similar to the first one, but it's more so based on cost of like manufacturing or whatever, rather than just market share. The third is vertical integration, where a company will buy other parts of their value chain. So rather than building their own integration, they might just buy a supplier or a vendor. So if you sell cans of tomatoes and you don't make the cans yourselves, you might go and buy the can company. Number 4 is new tech and expertise. It's pretty self-explanatory, but it's basically where a company is buying new capabilities that it doesn't currently have, something that it would be way cheaper to actually just buy a company that does it super well and knows it and buy the talent there than to build out that capability. Number 5 is what's called value creation. It's similar to the new tech one, but it's literally buying something in a new market, maybe not one that is necessary capability, but a segment of another market. So for example, a recent one was when Amazon bought Whole Foods, not so that Amazon could start selling food, but because Whole Foods was a good business that made a lot of money and was in a completely different sector. So it's just a good company for Amazon to own, and they can kind of hold it and later integrate if they want. And the last one is new markets. So rather than expanding, a company will basically buy a similar company to them in a different market. So if you're a very successful company in North America and you have no presence in Asia, rather than expanding, you might just go buy your Asian equivalent. Now, there are a variety of other reasons out there, smaller reasons why mergers and acquisitions happen. One of them, also an outlier, is basically a rare opportunity. Like when a great company with incredible assets is available at an ultra low price, that is also when some of these can happen. A good example of that would be a basketball team going through a controversy with the owner where they need to sell it despite everything about the team, everything else about the team being quite good. Now, I did a lot of research as to whether this time right now is a time where we should expect a lot of these mergers and acquisitions to take place, and kind of found out that the pre-COVID era was insanely successful. Basically, every research or study out there suggests that buying companies between 2008 and 2019 was a very smart decision, because that time, honestly, was like the greatest bull run there's ever been after the housing crisis. But the reality is that right now, we're actually in a COVID market cycle. We're kind of the late stage cycle of COVID where, there's massive inflation, interest rates, there's all these after effects of printing all this money. So how much does it actually make sense for mergers and acquisitions to take place? It obviously depends on the cash positions of these companies. And when it comes to Web3, obviously, any potential acquirer is going to be doing their due diligence, especially after everything that just happened with FTX. They're going to be looking at the books. They're going to be digging down, scraping to see what is going on. And scrape they have. There have actually been quite a few deals lately. Like literally just 2 weeks ago, Yuga Labs, which owns Bored Apes and CryptoPunks, bought Wenu, which is a company founded by Beeple and Guy Oseary that does a collection called 10KTF, which, full disclosure, I have many of. And then even earlier in the year, Uniswap, a decentralized exchange, bought Genie, which is kind of an NFT buying aggregate. eBay, a huge Web2 giant, bought Known Origin, which is a marketplace. And OpenSea, which is kind of like the biggest marketplace for NFTs, bought a company called Gem, very similar to Genie, where you can aggregate your purchases of NFTs. There's a report in The Block that actually suggests that 20 of the 53 biggest NFT and GameFi deals have happened just in the first half of 2022, many of them after that downturn. So there's definitely an appetite still now in Web3 for some of these deals to happen. Maybe some companies going for a pretty good price. Now, for an acquisition to take place, the conditions need to be right. As per Richard Kostenbaum, a veteran in mergers and acquisitions, he said in a recent Forbes article that spotting a potential acquirer requires the following questions. Is their business mature? Are they in a low growth phase, as in has growth slowed down? Do they generate a lot of cash? Do they have a strong balance sheet? Do they have fragmented competitors, or are they adjacent to an industry segment with fragmented competitors? And will they be able to help a smaller company to grow fast? If the answer to all these questions is yes, then the company is likely an acquirer. So with that in mind, let's look at each major player in the sports and Web3 space and give them a status of buyer, seller, or hold and steady. We'll start with the platforms, then move to the sports brands. First up, DraftKings. They are a buyer. What they have right now in Web3 is the Rainmakers NFTs, which is NFL fantasy product. They also have a functioning marketplace. It doesn't work super well. A lot of people don't like using it, but they have a lot of different projects and collectibles on there. I think DraftKings is an absolute buyer. They've bought 3 companies in the last 5 years, and their strategy is purely about market share in gaming and software. They also don't hesitate to spread awareness, having bought ads for Rainmakers literally everywhere and anywhere they could at the start of the season. DraftKings has tons of funding. They make tons of money, and their leadership team loves Web3 and they want to continue building there. I could see them buying like a tech kind of company, maybe like an integration there, but also one that has its own IP. I would say a good target for them would be Virtual Human Studio, which created the game Zed Run, which was one of the early kind of NFT market darlings where you race digital horses in this kind of virtual arena where you own them and whatever. That's something like that would make a lot of sense for DraftKings. Next up, Dapper Labs. I would say that they are a small buyer and also holding steady. Obviously, in Web3, they have various licensed sports NFT platforms. They have NFT native IP in CryptoKitties, and they have an entire blockchain in Flow with tons of projects and a $1.2 billion market cap. They have been a buyer this year. They bought other small companies, including Brud, which is kind of like this DAO creator, and they could continue that. I also think that buying something for them would be a lot more about market share or maybe a bit of tech and expertise than it would any of the others. But I think it's unlikely that they would buy one of their large competitors or make a big splash And I also don't think it's impossible that they would sell, but that would probably come at the top of the cycle, at the peak value of the company. Remember that this company, Roham and crew, they have veteran leadership here. They know how crypto goes up and down. If they ever sell, it would be high. It would not be low. And I actually don't think that they're that attractive right now for a buyer. Of course, they have a lot of great stuff, but they've only really made $300 million or so in selling their digital packs of collectibles, which is a ton of money. Don't get me wrong. But in the broader tech scheme, that's not a lot. That's actually not a lot of money. And their core products haven't really matured to this kind of like broader consumer level of adoption. So I think a lot of bigger companies who'd want to buy them are going to be waiting to see if they can do that in the next market cycle. My personal opinion here is that Dapper actually would probably maybe go public in a few years. I actually think that that's their end goal and something that they've promised their investors. Again, I have no info there. This is all pure speculation. And I also don't know how it works if you go public, but you already have like a publicly traded crypto token. Next up, SoRare, a seller. What they have in Web3 is a fully functioning fantasy platform where they have tons of soccer licenses, MLB, NBA. SoRare is still building. Their leadership is fresh, it's new, it's young, and the product is great. And I think soon could actually be the time to maybe change up the leadership. And again, that's nothing against Nicholas. He's done a fantastic job. Their team is awesome. But I could see them maybe one day selling to a DraftKings, a FanDuel, or an even bigger kind of sportsbook company. To me, SoRare is a ready-made product. It's near complete. It just needs that broader distribution. So I would buy it if I was one of those other big companies. Autograph. Seller. We profiled this company a few weeks ago on the podcast. It's co-founded by Tom Brady and his 24-year-old neighbor. What they have in Web3 is tons of partnerships with the greatest athletes on the planet, like Tiger Woods and stuff. Although I'm not really sure what those deals look like. No details are public, but their platform doesn't really work that well, and it's hosted on the DraftKings marketplace anyway. So it's kind of this kind of half-baked thing right now. I think they should sell. Things are not going well. There's value there, but there is no leadership. And I think some of their investors are probably kind of pissed off and upset with the lack of progress. Also, the FTX fallout is probably hitting them pretty hard. Sam Bankman-Fried, the CEO of FTX, was an advisor to Autograph, and Tom Brady is literally getting sued by I don't know who as part of the FTX endorsements. However, I think the one holdup to a potential acquisition of Autograph would be their association with DraftKings, with all their stuff being hosted there. So maybe that's a little bit too much for competitors to bite on that unless they wanted to move all those assets to a different hosted marketplace. The last one of the IP companies is Recur. I think they're a seller. Recur is a really interesting one. They raised $55 million in the bull market, a round which was led by New York Mets owner Steve Cohen. What they have in Web3 is tons of partnerships and IP licenses. They've signed tons of athletes and schools for NFTU, which we partnered with them to promote last spring. They also have a bunch of other intellectual property signed in terms of Paramount, Nickelodeon. They have Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Care Bears, freaking Rugrats, all this random stuff. I think another NFT company could and should buy them if the price is right, although there's still no proven case that like old IP, like nostalgic intellectual property, can actually work and find a market in Web3. Now, I want to take a pause here before we get to the bigger sports companies to just discuss the implications of IP licenses. You might have a big question that you're asking, which is if a platform like Dapper or Recur or SoRare sells, what happens to that license? Does it transfer over to the buyer? Well, it depends. The relations to the third party involved, to the licensor, if the company is bought as a licensee, is actually very important. Since the IP license is rewarded, it would likely require the licensor sign off for the licenses to transfer over to the new owners. How many times can you say licenses in just a few sentences? In the case of something like the NBA, the new owners of the digital collectibles license would need to ensure that there are no conflicts and probably also that the NBA is confident in that company buying it. So basically, if these licenses are going to get transferred to a new owner, basically the company that's licensing their stuff out has to say, okay. That's kind of what I've been able to glean. So yes, it can transfer, but it's very conditional. Now on to some of these big companies that are not Web3 natives. The first up, of course, is Disney. They are a buyer. And I just want to give a caveat here that Disney only really buys established IP and brands, stuff that they can immediately monetize into something much bigger. Think about all those titles that we mentioned earlier. Of all the brands in the NFT space, none of them make sense. Like, doesn't matter how big they are, apes, whatever, none of those come even close to having the deep-rooted IP and also deep-rooted fan base, the international fan base that some of those other big licenses had or IPs had. What I could see Disney doing is making a tech play. For example, 7 years ago, they bought a company called BAMTech, which was developed actually by Major League Baseball as their homegrown software to stream baseball games. They used that technology, Disney used that technology to develop Disney Plus, and they spent $3 billion on it. They also combined it with a different acquisition a few years prior called Maker Studios. They combined all of that into what you now see as Disney Plus. So whatever Disney wants to make as the metaverse, I could see them buying tech companies in the space rather than the IPs. Nike, a buyer. They already bought Artifact a year ago, which we detailed on the podcast a few weeks back. Nike has a massive digital capture strategy. They keep buying data infrastructure companies to basically help them build out the digital future of retail. That is where they're going. Right now, I don't think they're going to buy anything just yet, but they could buy something like a wallet integration or digital ID company sometime very soon in the future, or even something that just kind of helps people integrate with events, a company like Token Proof, for example. Adidas, holding steady. Adidas is a brand that is more of a collaborator than kind of like a big giant that buys and sells. They already have a bunch of metaverse projects, and they tend to honestly build these departments internally. So I don't think that they would really, shy away from leveraging any Web3 tech, but I don't think they're going to go out there and buy like a big IP or tech company like a Nike would. I think they'll just use it. Now, there are two more companies that I wanted to bring up. They don't really fit into the IP or the sports apparel companies that I just mentioned. The first one is fan-controlled football, and I think they would be a seller. The FCF is a startup football league, an actual football league, not a metaverse one, and it's where people can own the teams and collectively online literally decide what play the quarterback is going to pick next. It's an awesomely novel concept. I think they just had their second season last summer, and it's like literally you open the app. If you own one of their kind of like ownership tokens or whatever, you open the app and you and the other owners of the team literally tell the team what they're going to do next game by game, hence the name fan-controlled football. Sports IP is the hottest thing in content right now. It's the only true source of original content. And they already tokenized last season with different NFT projects like Bored Apes taking a team, like literally having a stake in a team or controlling them. So this idea has legs. I think this is something that one of these bigger companies should absolutely buy and look at because it's both tech and IP and something that could be an up-and-comer. The other kind of non-category company is Niantic, which I think should be a buyer. If you remember Pokemon Go, Niantic is the company behind it. They made the app and bought the Pokemon license and sent millions of people all over the world running around their neighborhoods trying to capture Pokemon in the metaverse with their phones. Remember that experience? That is like way before any of this stuff. Then Niantic just launched a product called NBA All World in direct partnership with the NBA. And last November, a year ago, Niantic raised $300 million to build the real world metaverse. So they're clearly primed to do a lot there. I'm not sure if they would make any other big sports plays yet. Maybe they have some others in mind, but they're clearly hungry. They have a lot of money. And I think that they're going to be very successful in the NFT space and should consider potentially buying some of the NFT IPs. So, will any of these actually come true? And what's actually going to happen? Well, here's what I think. I think the league licenses will continue to expect revenue from the platforms that they license to. I think it's going to put pressure, especially right now in the bear, on ventures to either deliver or reconfigure the deals. I think for all we know, some of these licenses have certain revenue targets that need to be met. And if they don't, then the licensor can get out of the deal. We don't know what these look like. And I also think that in the next bull run, we might see something very different in sports. We might see, the hot items being tickets, wallets, fandom apps, fandom tokens. There's no proven case that digital collectibles and even just digital NFT fantasy sports are actually the end game of Web3. For all we know, we'll leave them behind in the next run. I hope not, but that might happen. What I am confident in saying is that apparel, retail, and digital ownership definitely is something that is going to be hot in the next run and the ones after. So the brands have more legs here, I think, than the actual platforms. Okay, now there are two companies that we have not mentioned at all. They are giant businesses, giant corporations, and they are two of the richest companies in history. Neither has made a move yet in Web3, but doesn't mean they won't. They are Apple and Amazon. Both has expressed an interest in live sports. In fact, Amazon is hosting Thursday night football games this year, and Apple Plus has streamed some MLB games this past summer. They've both bought into broadcasting live sports in a clear attempt to actually finally kill cable television. And both companies have the cash to literally buy anything they want and can even build their own homegrown product and then buy all competitors in that field. So in the next run, I would say keep an eye out for those two. And that's it for us, folks. We will see you next time on The First Minute.